Hey everyone, I'm Anthony Gethers.
And I'm Greg Weiss.
And we are good dudes with bad hearts.
No, literally. Our hearts are broken.
I have heart failure.
And I have a transplant.
We never thought we'd have heart problems.
But we do.
And they're real.
And they suck. And that's why we're here.
To talk to you about heart failure,
heart attacks, and everything that comes with these conditions.
Each week we will bring you an episode featuring guests with heart issues.
We're talking about doctors and health professionals.
And we're talking about everyday people.
Like you and I. Together, we'll share useful information.
Providing useful lifestyle tips.
And how to prepare heart-healthy meals.
We'll tell our stories and hopefully make your hearts
better.
Welcome to Change of Heart.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Change of Heart. I am Anthony Gethers. I'm here with my co-host,
Greg Weiss. Glad to be here, and always a pleasure to do another episode to hear stories about people surviving heart disease.
Absolutely. And today we have a very unique guest, John Spagnolo. Say hello, John.
Hey, what's going on?
What I love about John's setup there is that John's got his cool drum set in the background. Let's actually show in a full frame. This is very, very awesome. You very seldom get people who sit behind a drum kit and actually want to discuss heart disease. So it's actually very, very unique. So, John, let's discuss a little bit of history. If you want to go into what happened to you first, and then we'll go backwards and say, okay, so where did it all start?
Sure. So I guess the biggest thing that started for me in around 2016, I don't actually remember the exact date. I was sitting in my room watching TV, relaxed, actually eating an Italian ice and watching the news. And you had the air conditioner going right next to me. It was summertime, but I was cool. Nothing was wrong. And all of a sudden, I just felt like strange, like lightheaded. And I felt my pulse and it seemed kind of high. So I had a blood pressure cuff that I put on there just to check my blood pressure. I did have blood pressure problems, and I noticed that my blood pressure not only wasn't high, but my pulse pressure was very close together. It was 15 apart. So it was like 120 over 105 or something like that. I don't recall the exact numbers, but very close, and they shouldn't be that close.
No.
So I also noticed my pulse was like 128, and I'm like, I'm not exercising. I'm just sitting here relaxed. This should not be. So at the time I was a single dad, and I had two kids who were 6 and 7 or 7 and 8 at the time. So I realized that there was something going on. I was an EMT, so I knew something was wrong. So I contacted a couple neighbors and got the kids to come to get coverage for my kids. And I called 911. The ambulance came and they checked me out and they said, all right, let's go out to the ambulance. I had a stone driveway. I lived on this mountain, and they didn't want to come down the driveway, and they didn't want to bring the stretcher down.
Wow.
So they had me walk up this hill to the ambulance. And I remember thinking, like,
hill, and meanwhile you were in the middle of having a heart attack.
Yeah, basically. And I guess they just didn't realize the severity yet. Okay. And they're walking me up, and I said, guys, I'm pretty dizzy. I'm pretty lightheaded. And they were like, all right, it's just a few more steps. So I won't say what ambulance company this was, but I'm very thankful for them, because once they got me in the ambulance, laid me down and did an EKG, they started to realize what was going on. And he started to check me out and everything. And they were like, all right, guys, let's roll. And they started to bring me, and then my pulse just kept getting higher and higher. And it got to the point where my pulse was completely out of control. And it got up to 286. And shit. Yeah, it was going pretty good. And I really don't even know how I stayed conscious, quite honestly. And I was able to think. I probably couldn't have walked at that point, but I was able to think and understand what was happening. So he gave me a dose of some medicine that through the eye, he had set up an IV and everything. And he gave me a dose of the medication that should have brought my heart rate down significantly. And it didn't even budge it. In fact, I think went to 282 from 286 or something like that.
That's not like a
And
big-
yeah, so he said, all right, I'm calling the doctor at the emergency room. I'm asking for permission to give you a double dose or whatever, because you're a big guy. I was probably around 303 at that point.
Whoa.
So yeah, I was pretty overweight. And so he told me, he says, listen, if I don't get the okay for this, I'm going to have to defibrillate you. I said, okay, listen, bud, I was an EMT for years, and first rule of defibrillation is you don't do it to a conscious person. It's not the protocol. He says, oh, I understand. He says, but in this case, I have to get your heart rate under control. He says, and it's going to hurt like hell. I said, so you're going to stop my heart and bring me back if you can't get it under control? And he says, yes. He says, if I don't get the okay from the doctor for them med in about a minute, I'm going to have to do this because your heart is just destroying itself. And your vital organs aren't getting any blood flow right now.
Wow. So he would literally stop your heart. He'd have to stop your heart, get it under control. So he's almost like killing you in a sense.
Correct.
Well, that's the procedure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
uncommon is they literally got to pull the plug and plug you back in to reset your tempo.
Everybody thinks of that when they shock it in the emergency room on the TV shows and like, oh, that starts your heart. No, it doesn't.
It actually
stops
your
it.
heart.
Defibrillator. It stops the fibrillation of your heart. So yes, it stops it, and then they do compressions and get it going again.
Okay.
There's no guarantee that they're going to get it going again, but that's the procedure because they know that, there's no other choice at that point.
Wow.
So I gave the okay, and I said, okay, I understand. And I said a prayer and just prepared for it. And just as he was literally putting the stuff on me, he got the call back from the hospital, and they said, go ahead, give him the double dose. So they gave that to me through the IV, and I felt it like my whole chest I felt the change, and it dropped down to like 180 and then like 160. And they said, okay, we can roll now. And the ambulance proceeded to bring me to the hospital. They drew blood at the hospital, of course, as soon as I got there, and they ran their tests. And I can't recall the name of the material that floats around in your blood, but that's what they measure if you had a heart attack or not. And it was through the roof. If I remember the numbers, it was 0.4 showed signs of a heart attack, and I had like 400 or 4,400. It was just through the roof. Gosh, I wish I could remember the name of that stuff they measure for, but it was showing that I had a massive heart attack. Yeah. And I still never lost consciousness. I was conscious through everything. And then a little bit later, somebody came and analyzed my EKG, and they said, well, there was no blockage. They didn't show any blockage. And then they insisted on doing a cath and checking, and sure enough, there was no blockage. I don't know how I didn't have any blockage, but I had like 40%, which is not even enough reason to put in a stent. So they said, okay. So the electrophysiologist checked it out. I think it was the next day, and said, no, I know what's going on here. And he came in, and I remember this really clearly. He came in, and this was when Donald Trump was, no politics here, but this was when Donald Trump was starting to talk about running for president, or was about to run. And he came in and he shook my hand. He says, it's such an honor to meet you. I'm so glad to meet you. And did that 3 times during our conversation. He kept shaking my hand and said, really, it's such a, I said, who am I, Donald Trump or something? I mean, why, what's the big deal? Why are you shaking my hand so many times? He says, I've been doing this for a long time. He says, and I've seen EKGs just like this. He says, but the difference with yours is you're alive. He said, I've never seen an EKG that looked like this where the patient lived.
Wow.
He said, usually the first chamber goes into Afib, and yours was at 286. He says, now normally the last chamber would be at half of that. That's how the heart works. It's 2 pumps for every one. He said mine was 286 on both ends.
Wow.
So it
crazy.
was just going like this. And it wasn't pumping any blood at that point because it's got to be like, boom, you know, it's got to push it through. It wasn't pushing it through. I had basically no blood flow for some point, and
your heart wasn't filling. It wasn't filling to pump out.
Right.
And that's what the pulse number is. And just from my experience is your number is below 100. And below 100, your heart is filling with blood to pump it out. But if you were talking like a 128, it's basically it wasn't filling to pump out. It was.
Can I ask you a question? I'm still impressed by the fact that the doctor was shaking your hand, saying, "Congratulations, you made it."
It was crazy. I was like,
I hear that, I'm like,
and that's when it hit me. Like, wow, I survived something that most people wouldn't have survived.
Exactly. What do you think was a contributing factor to that?
I'm stubborn. I'm not leaving. I don't know. You know, I have no idea. I really don't. I have no idea. I could tell you, and I'm not bragging when I say this, I had no fear. Like I just wasn't, I didn't think, I was like, I'm not ready to die. I'm not I have to take care of my kids. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. And I think that my attitude might have helped, but contributing factors physically, I have no idea. No clue.
John,
just
I also wonder if you're mental. I mean, it sounds like you have a very strong personality, and it sounds like, and again, the stubborn part can be a contributing factor. But it just sounds like your mental attitude or your aptitude kind of might have been a contributing factor. I mean, the fact that, look, if you were 300 pounds, you said at the time it was 303 with your weight,
so right around there.
You're probably a pretty strong dude. I'm sure, you know, physically and mentally. Like
I was a weightlifter for a long time.
Okay, here we go. As Craig and I discussed before about having athletes on
an athletic past. The other thing, John, is we have a subject here that when it comes up, we like to interject it, and we call it man pride. Yep. And that man pride is both the cause and the answer to problems sometimes, and it definitely sounds like your man pride saved your life.
Well, that's good. That's not like man spreading, right? Because I'm doing that because I'm sitting at the kid.
Comedy shows on another channel.
Okay.
And,
well, that's I was comical through the whole thing too. I made jokes through the entire thing, so that's part of it too. You know, I do that. Yeah.
I hear you, because what happens is when the opposite occurs is then people know they're sick and they don't do anything about it, and part of that reflection is they have to be providers, they have to be role models, they have to be authoritarian figures to their family and their kids, like you were talking about, and you weren't ready to give that up. And while I don't hear exactly, you know, that where some people go, I was short of breath, it took months, I didn't know what to do, should I go see a doctor, am I just going to be okay? This was an onset, and it sounds like you really handled it, and that your mental state did bring you through, as opposed to the opposite of causing your demise.
A lot of people would have just ignored it. And I do contribute that partly to having been an EMT. I knew something was wrong, but I also knew to check. And then I also knew that it was a situation that maybe it would have passed, but it needed immediate attention, not I'll go to the doctor on Monday. And I do think that was a factor. But, you know, I don't know what the exact statistics are, but I know that I think in men like in their 40s, are the highest rate of fatal heart attacks, because they just think it's nothing. Like, that's, I don't know, a chest pain. It's no big deal. Meanwhile, they're having a heart attack and they die. Yeah, heartburn or something else.
I had a bad burrito last night. So
yeah, a lot of people think it's heartburn and they think it's nothing, and then next thing you know, they're found at the wheel of their car dead. driving home from
driving to
work
the
or-
hospital.
Or
Maybe,
driving to the
yeah.
hospital.
Yeah, when they finally get to the point like, okay, I can't take it anymore. But yeah, they ignore it. Where guys, when they're in their 50s and their 60s and certainly in their 70s, they get some chest pain. Like, oh, I better look into this a little bit more. Call somebody.
Well, we're glad to hear you saved your life, and it happens a lot. This is what the change of heart is about. It's about that struggle up the hill, and then the attack happens, and afterwards the treatments begin, the health attitude changes, your diet changes, and you take the new approach on the second half of your life. And how are you eating? What do you have you changed from where you were to who you are?
Absolutely. I've gone up and down in weight. I've tried different things. I tried keto. I tried just I tried vegan. I just couldn't. No offense to anybody that does it. Just I couldn't.
You offended
I
Anthony,
couldn't
but
eat
that's
it all
okay.
the time. But now, and what I've been doing for the last year is mostly vegetarian. We're going to have some venison steaks tonight, actually, which is about as lean as you're going to get. But generally speaking, I don't eat meat very often at all anymore. In fact, I live mostly on beans and fruit. That's my diet now. And I'm diabetic. My A1C is like 6, so it's completely under control. All my blood work, I just had a full workup done a few months ago. Everything looks great. And I'm 214 this morning. So, Greg, you've seen the difference, Greg. I'm sure.
I always ask
75 pounds.
At least.
How long did it take you to lose the weight?
The first 50 or 60 pounds actually just kind of fell off. Everybody was like, "What are you doing? What happened?" Every time I see you, you're skinnier, and I was. And really, it was just a change of what I was eating. I cut out carbs. And when I say carbs, I mean starches, white carbs. So no potatoes, no rice, no pasta, no bread, all the good stuff, all the stuff I love, pizza. I could live the rest of my life on pizza happily, but my body is not happy with it.
No.
And when I realized that, and no sugar, the only sugar I get in my body is from apples and maybe some raisins, just fruit. If it's naturally occurring, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
No processed foods, no processed anything.
Wow.
And,
Good for you.
Not necessarily all organic, but I don't like eating things that come in a box or that have a name.
Well, box, bag, or what's the other phrase? Box or bag. That kind of actually puts a big damper on. Like you're getting processed foods when it comes in the box and bag.
Right. If it's got a commercial, it's probably not good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So now I want to go back to the procedure. So how did you feel in the process? Like, because obviously you mentioned the doctor said that congratulations, you lived. But tell me about the process of going through the procedure. I'm sure you were out in the process, but then what were you going through in the process? I saw that you've done the same process 3 times. Okay, go ahead.
So what I actually had done was he suggested, and of course I agreed to, was a cardiac ablation. So they went in and, they burned the areas of the heart that are given a problem, that are given the misfires electrically that caused the Afib. And he told me it'll probably last for about 5 years, but it's usually very successful, which is about what it lasted. I started having problems again after about 5 years, and I had a second ablation about 1.5 years ago, and it actually got worse, which is always a possibility. And so yesterday I had a colonoscopy. Not to get into that subject, but it just so happened the anesthesiologist came in. He was going over all of my medications, and he says, "You're on 2 blood thinners?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay." And he's looking at my EKG, and he says, "What's your condition?" I said, "Well, I have AFib and I get SVTs." And he says, "And you had an ablation?" I said, "I had 2." I said, "The last one was about 1.5 years ago." He says, "Doesn't look like it worked," because I was in AFib at the moment. And my watch tells me that I'm in AFib several times a day. Most of the time I can just say, okay, it's just the way it is, and I just keep going, or maybe I slow down a little bit, but there's times I have to just, well, there's some things you can do physically to stop yourself from AFib, like bearing down, and some other maneuvers. I lay on my side on one side and, hold my breath and bear down. And sometimes I have to go through that because it gets so bad that I can't even stand up. I'm so lightheaded, and I know my blood just isn't getting to places like my brain where it's needed. Okay. So, I don't want to stroke out.
Can that be addressed medically with?
I've switched. The regular cardiologist I have left the practice I was in, and now I have a new one who I actually just saw the first time about a month ago, and now I'm going through all the tests all over again that I've gone through. Yes, so echo and
the biggest fear I have.
And they said maybe I should put you through a stress test. I said, I really don't want to do another stress test. It's always chemical for me because of some physical problems, and I just don't like the experience, and I just don't think it's necessary at this point, personally. I said, let's look at everything else first, and then if you think it's necessary. But I had one a year ago. I mean, it's not like I haven't had one recently. In fact, it was 9 months ago. So I just didn't feel like it was necessary to do everything all over again. But I have some serious dizzy problems if I hold my head up too high, or if I'm bending over and looking down. I've actually fainted twice from doing it.
Oh, wow. This is recent. This is recently?
Yeah. Yes. And I don't know the why of that. They just did an ultrasound Monday, I think it was, of my carotid arteries just to make sure there's sufficient blood flow, and there doesn't seem to be a problem with that. So
equilibrium is an issue because it happens with a lot of heart patients, is that gravity can sometimes be your worst enemy. And I hear you talking about similar things that I can go through. If it's just literally bending over and picking something up, you can feel that rush going on.
Yes.
And
I had that for a little bit as well.
What happens is your heart prefers a stable sedentary condition. It wants to be in a certain position in a certain place. And when you move around, sometimes it'll literally cause pressure in one part of your body or another that'll make you feel that way. And it's one of the things that I had to address is just be careful of your situation and where you are. And if you feel something, change something. And it's something that we hear often talking to people like this, and it's not uncommon what you're feeling. It's just unique to you.
You're a walking miracle too, Greg.
It's
amazing what you've been through.
I don't talk about it a lot. And what I will say is that I met John through John's wife, Cynthia. And I met Cynthia. She's my pharmacist. And when you're on sometimes 24 different medications, what happens essentially is insurance won't cover it. They won't cover the brand. You need a certain number. And these are things that are so far out of the patient's reach that if you don't have a pharmacist who cares, you could end up in the emergency room quickly. And shout out to Cynthia, and thank you again for everything. Feeling blessed. And John's a lucky guy because he's got his own pharmacologist.
That's awesome. Yes. Yeah. How many people can say that they're married to a pharmacologist?
And I should probably have stock in all these pharmaceutical companies with the list of things I'm on, but it's nice to have somebody trying to keep on top of that for me, because honestly, it's overwhelming. Did this need to be refilled? Does the doctor need to be called? And as soon as my refills are done, she's already sending the thing to the doctor for me. And sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't. Doctors' offices are not great at that. So A lot of
I also
times you got to give
wonder-
them a nudge.
Well, that's true, but I also wonder, considering that our society is not the healthiest, I would say, I will also wonder if they're overwhelmed. You know,
Oh,
look,
without
I'm not
a
trying to
doubt.
defend them, but I
Without
also
a
wonder,
doubt.
yeah, that they're overwhelmed.
I can make a claim to that. When I had my transplant 3 years in November, when I first started with my transplant coordinator, she probably had about 20 to 25 cases like me. And I had just asked her out of the blue, because the farther out you get, they want you to quote unquote lead a more normal life. But I asked her, I said, how many people like me are you covering now, considering I'm not your most important critical post-transplant case? And what she said to me was a little staggering, that it's close to 400 cases since me that are under her umbrella. And that's staggering. I mean, she needs to see me less, because I'm further down the road, and I'm definitely more stable than I was in your first year. But to know that there are close to 400 successful transplants just in her office is mind-boggling. And it's one of the things that people don't talk about. They just expect if you're going to get heart disease, you're going to get taken care of. And to come back and hear these numbers, you have to ask yourself, where's all the staff? Where are all these people? Where's the support for them to take care of you? And it's literally going to be an as-is basis. So, you know, it in John's case, he's got support, you know, with on the medical side. And I'm sure if you yell and scream loud enough at the emergency room door, they'll let you in. So, you know, it's there's a lot going on with that. And we've heard it from other people too, about how the hospitals, once you're in, they don't give up on you, and they won't let you give up on yourself. And so they see that it's you know, it's all part of this.
Okay. John, let me ask you this. So what are you doing right now? I know obviously you have a much better diet. As far as physical fitness, what are you doing? What are you doing to take care of yourself in that way? Now, obviously, you mentioned that you have the dizzy spells as well, and you become lightheaded. So I'm sure you're gonna be very careful in how you do that. But what are you doing at this point to keep yourself in shape?
Drumming.
Oh, I'm playing the drums. All right.
I play the drums, and that really does get me some good cardio. Without, I have some bad knees and hips, so it doesn't hurt that, as opposed to getting on a treadmill.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. Otherwise, I go to the gym. I'll go on the stationary bike for cardio. That's about the only thing I can really do.
Okay.
And I lift weights, use machines, things like that. I've been doing it more lately. I kind of go through stages where I go and then I stop and then I go, but I think like a lot of people.
Okay.
But yes, those are the main things I do. I've had a lot of serious atrophy, especially during this weight loss. I've lost tons of muscle. It's just staggering. And I know age is just part of it. Yep. So I'm trying to gain some of it back. I've never had loose flesh on my arms in my life. And
oh, wow.
I actually measured my arms, and I'm like, wow, my arms are like 3 inches smaller than they used to be.
Wow.
And so I realized how much strength I actually lost. So that's important to me now to get back. So weight training is more important now than cardio when I go to the gym. I think it's just more important for me. And other than that, it's just diet and, you know, trying to keep healthy things in mind when I'm doing things. Like sometimes it hurts, you know, to go to the gym. My legs are killing me. I could barely walk, but I still do legs. Maybe not my greatest day, but I still do legs. But I've already noticed an increase in, you know, in the last month or so, how much weight I could do compared to what it was like on day one when I went back after having been out for months. So it does come back. Even at, I just turned 59 this month. It does come back. I don't consider myself old, but I'm definitely not a spring chicken anymore. and
Sure.
you can't expect the weights to have the same effect in your body to, it needs more time to come back after a workout session. It just does.
Yeah. Well, I find that for me, I stopped. I used to do a lot of free weights, and after my heart condition, after my heart incident, I am now focusing mostly on machines, only because of balance. Balance, and as Greg said earlier, with equilibrium.
Yes.
Seriously, that's really kind of the key thing. So I just played around with the weight bar probably about 2 weeks ago, just doing a bench press, flat bench. And I found even with the 45-pound, was it 35 or 45-pound weight bars?
You said 45s.
Yeah, so the 45, no, I'm talking about the bar itself. Even just playing around with that, I felt a little unstable. So I then reverted over to the machine and said, let me just focus on doing my chest here. But not so much laying down horizontally, but doing the vertical straight chest, the flat, but doing it vertically instead. That one I felt much more stable in doing that. So
I'm the same.
okay.
And the only free weights I use right now are dumbbells.
Okay.
That's the only one. And I also have an issue with my hand. I had an accident where my wrist got cut from side to side, and it severed the nerve, the artery, it severed everything.
Wow.
So I have no feeling in these three fingers, and it very little strength. It's hard to manipulate this and hold this.
Really?
My phone is heavy.
Okay. So even when you play drums, does it impact you holding the sticks as well?
100%. I have drumsticks that are all different ways to help me hold them, different wraps on them and things like that, depending on how bad my hand is. This thing, because I can't control where it is. I can't control where the stick is in my hand, and the only place I can grip it are these two fingers.
Mm.
And the same goes when I'm in the gym. I mean, I just can't, I don't have the ability to pick up the weights because I can't hold them.
Okay, so when you're doing,
I can't do shoulder shrugs with a barbell.
I was going to ask you about that as well. Shoulder shrugs. Now, what about doing, if you're doing curls, can you hold the weight, or do you have to?
It's different because you're holding it in your hand. So as long as I have it balanced correctly, yes.
Okay.
But I have to be careful the way I pick it up, and I have to keep it like leaning towards me.
Okay.
But it's scary, so I just end up using the machine.
Got it.
Go on the machine, and it's not going to go anywhere. And I can use this part of it, to hold the machine handle. And I don't have to worry about it slipping out and falling and hurting me or somebody else, or being
embarrassed. Does it bother you psychologically? Because I know that for me, my ego, going back to the man pride thing,
100%.
When you go from being able to lift these heavy weights and making these adjustments, and free weights, as we all know, that's the gold standard in the gym. If you can lift free weights, you're always happy. But then when you have to almost go down to the machines, like I was watching Arnold's documentary recently. Arnold works out strictly, it's a Schwarzenegger. Obviously, he only works out strictly on machines at this point. I mean, he's 75. He's 75.
Right.
But we still in our head imagine Arnold 1975.
I lived in a Gold's Gym for years, and now I go to Planet Fitness where you're not allowed to make any noise when you're working out. It's a completely different environment for me, and not the one I would choose to be in 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was still playing softball in probably 2 or 3 teams, and I was much more active and much different person. And it was all it's kind of funny, but I would kind of laugh at the people that used machines.
I'm gonna interject and say that my cardio routine always seems to change when you live out in the woods. We just had a tree fell, and my neighbor chopped it up from me. Oh, you understand.
I just lost one yesterday.
2 days ago here, and my neighbor came in and cut it down and chopped it up, and now I'm doing the cleanup, to avoid a financial hit. And it's work. I got to saw branches. I've got to literally bundle up these tree limbs and haul them across the street and find a more inconspicuous place for them. And I've got 12 to 18-inch thick 2-foot long tree pieces that probably weigh 20-30 pounds each, and I got to haul them together. And just a side note, my decrepit wheelbarrow broken arm, now I got to replace that. But it doesn't end. My cardio is mowing my lawn, and that's going to end in about a week or two with the weather, thank God. And I don't snow shovel. I've got my tree guy is my snow guy, and there's always efforts to do that are of different physical expenditures when you're a homeowner. And I don't push myself, but I make sure I get going, and that's part of my recovery in my way. They don't actually want me going to a gym. They don't want to actually put me on machines. So there's also another reason for that is when I got ill, it was the pre-naming of COVID, and they don't want me catching communicable diseases.
Mm-hmm. All right, so final question before we wrap up. So, John, what would you recommend, what would you tell people over 40, especially men in particular, what would you recommend to them in reference to taking care of their overall health, but in particular their heart?
So let's go back to me laughing about the guys on the machines at the gym. And,
Sure.
My friend that's no longer with us, we used to go to the gym all the time, and we would kind of laugh at the guys that were on the, the stair climbers and things. And like, we didn't care about that stuff. We didn't want to do cardio. We wanted to get bigger. I wanted to look like, when I was a teenager, I wanted to look like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Columbo and all these guys that were massive. And that's what I cared about, powerlifting and getting big. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah,
Stupidest thing ever. You lose all your flexibility and you lose your cardio, and the strongest muscle in your body is your heart, and it's the most important one. It doesn't matter how strong you are. If you can bench press 500 pounds, if you have a heart attack because you can't walk up a flight of stairs and you're out of breath, and it's so much more important for longevity. You look at guys like Bruce Springsteen. That man runs around for 3.5 hours, and he's I don't know how old he's, late 60s,
70. I think he's 70. He's over. I think he's 72.
He's got
I saw him in 2017 at Meadowlands, and I saw him running from side to side on that stage, and he had a boom mic, one of those headphone boom mics.
Sure.
And you think, all right, he's running around. You can hear him saying he's going to be catching. Come on, Rosie. No, he did not breathe heavy. That man obviously runs and does his cardio, and to be in that kind of condition at that age. And even Mick Jagger, I just saw a video of Mick Jagger dancing around.
Survived the heart operation too.
Yep, that's right.
But he's always been in shape. He's always been thin, and certainly the weight is a big thing. If you're in your 40s, lose it now because it's harder in your 50s.
Yes, it is.
It really is. The weight loss is tough.
Yep.
So that would be my advice. Don't avoid the cardio. Do the cardio, and stop making excuses and
get checked and
get
learn your numbers.
That's the next thing I was going to say. See where you are, and talk to somebody. If you're 40, you should probably start a relationship with a cardiologist and get a good checkup and see where you're at
before you're face down or face up looking at.
You got high school kids that drop dead because they don't know they have a heart problem. If you don't think that could happen when you're 40, lots of people don't know they have a heart problem.
Before you go, John, I'm going to say thank you again for this appearing on the Change of Heart podcast and being open enough about your story that hopefully people listen to this and take heed that no one's infallible. It could always happen to them. It could be mild. It could be serious. It could be fatal. And take care of yourself and go get your numbers checked. And the important thing is that we want you here. We want you for the second half to continue what you started, and that you can live your dreams, take care of your kids, be part of your family, and that you're taking care of yourself now in a way that it took a change of heart to occur and make that happen. So my co-host Anthony and I want to thank you, and
Thanks for having me.
take us out.
Take us out with the beat, John.
Take us
All
out
right.
with a beat, John. We appreciate it.
Nice to know, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks very
Good
much.
night,
See you next
Hollywood. So you gotta yell out, "Good night, Springfield."
Good night. Good night, Springfield.